What is going on, Amazon sellers? Happy Sunday. Welcome back to the second episode of our new Sunday show, where we'll drop some Amazon news or e-commerce news. Of course, we're going to serve it up with a fresh side of snark, and we will tackle your guys' Amazon questions as well. I'm Chris Grant, and to my right is the argyrophilic Chris Rasick. Now, for those of you who might be new here, our job is to try to make sense of the senseless and hopefully help you. So if you've got questions about flipping items from clearance aisles, pulling the trigger on anything online arbitrage, or maybe trying to open up your first wholesale account, will help. And of course, if you've got questions about Keepa, we will dive down that rabbit hole as well. So let's dive in. I'll tell you what. Before we dive in, hey, Paulie, what's going on? And Amar, glad to see you guys in here. Before we dive in, I don't have an ad this Sunday, but I wanted to share a couple of things. Number one, it takes an insane amount of trust for Chris to show up here every Sunday and every Wednesday, and let me call him some name that he I'm sure he knows some of these, but I'm sure that some of them, like, you have just no idea what it might be unless you look it up before the show.
Right. And this one I actually did.
Okay, good.
Because I saw, like, when I first saw it, I thought agoraphobic, and I was like, what? So I ended up, I did go down it, and it actually does apply. I've always preferred silver over gold.
Interesting. Now, do you mean that for as to wear or as to invest in, or both?
No, wearing. Like
Okay.
I always, I always like my wedding ring is, I don't know, it's titanium or something like that. But yeah, that colorway, I was never like the yellow gold. I was never a fan.
Same. I would say, oh, titanium. No, mine is whatever the cheapest was when I got married. So it might just be stainless steel, or heck, I don't know. It's aluminum. I'm not sure, but I'm not changing it out. So,
right.
Now, one of the other things I was thinking about something this morning, because my son is on spring break, and of course, every spring break, it's, are we going to go somewhere? And this spring break, I was like, listen, I can't really go anywhere. I've got too many irons in the fire. It's just not really going to happen. But he got the opportunity to go with some friends of ours and go up in the mountains. And my very first thought was, viewer screens and being outside, like, yes, you go. Absolutely. Fortunately, he was just as excited as well. And then I started thinking about it a little bit. And I posted something on Twitter about how, and Facebook, about how selling on Amazon is kind of like learning to be a parent. You can take a parenting class, you can read all the books, but nothing really prepares you until you actually are just thrown into the fire. But then when it comes to raising kids, it's kind of the same as picking a product to sell on Amazon. And I know that this is gonna be like, come on, you're making a stretch here. But honestly, I was thinking about it this morning. We're really just playing the odds for like everything when it comes to decisions for our kids. So, and here's where I figured that out at is they're in North Carolina, and there's a massive set of storms that have been rolling through the United States. Supposed to get them here where I live, I don't know, around like 10 p.m. tonight. And I was watching that, and I was like, I don't want to say, no, you can't go, because, there could possibly be a really bad storm, or, could possibly be a tornado. And I was like, but on the other hand, I want you to be safe. I want to make the best decision. And so then I've got to play the odds. How many people actually, get hurt or stranded because of these types of storms? What have past storms done? And should I, play the odds that, yeah, you're probably going to be fine, and go. And then we kind of do the same thing when we're choosing a product to sell on Amazon. We've got a bunch of the data available to us, and we just got to play the best odds we possibly can. Anyway, I'm not exactly sure where I'm going, other than the fact that that's the kind of garbage that floats around in my head as I'm putting in groceries and cleaning the kitchen and stuff.
Now, you know what? There's something to it. At least the process, and the way we're forced to react and make decisions and whatnot. Because honestly, we've talked about how there's a lot of tweets and stuff that I've seen about CEOs and people that we look up to, the really, really smart people, the real successful people. And there's a train of thought that tries to explain that these people are winging it more than you realize. We tend to put them up on a pedestal and think that they have everything figured out, when in reality, they're simply having to make the best decision that they can at the moment and adjust and adapt. And they're winging it far more. And really the first taste of that I got was when you realize that parenting, because as a kid, for a while there, if you have a fairly healthy relationship, you kind of look at your parents as infallible for a period of time. They seem to know everything. And then as you get older, usually in your teen years, that's when the rebellion kicks in. But I think part of the vehicle for that is the fact that you're realizing that they don't know everything. In fact, certain years of your teen years, you think they don't know anything at a point, so it's so there's that kind of decompression as they come off the pedestal that you put them on. And it's kind of similar to these really successful people, figuring out that they're realizing that they're winging it, and it's like, all right. But the positive from that is that it's not as far away for you as you might have thought. They don't have something that you simply don't have within yourself to get to where they got. So it's deflating at first, but it turns out it can actually be inspiring, to be honest.
Absolutely. Yeah. 100%. And if you're like, well, these guys are so full of it, you got to remember the guys who are the people that we look up to that, seem to have gotten it all right. They don't write their memoirs or their autobiographies until they're in their 60s, 70s, and 80s, when hindsight is very 2020. And they can just pick the highlights, I'm thinking
much the same issue that people have with social media,
right?
Just looking at $1 million sellers and you're only seeing the highlights. You're not seeing the 5-figure bad buy. They're not going to post about that. So
and Joel, I've got an 11-year-old. He thinks I don't know squat, and the phrase that has been thrown about the house quite readily lately is "prove it." Which, I mean, Chris, I typically carry around the receipts. So he's been getting smacked around with some facts here lately. All right. As part of this show, I envisioned it. Well, I mean, it was kind of Chris's idea, but as are a lot of the good ideas that have been on the podcast and these shows. But I then sort of envisioned this as somewhat of a time for us to be able to do some deeper dives. On Wednesdays, we like to go through 2-3 different things. And on Sundays, I figured we could dive a little bit deeper into 1 or 2 topics in total. So today, we're going to dive down a rabbit hole for Amazon placement fees. Goody. Recently, a really smart Amazon seller and 3PL owner. He's not a prep center owner. I think that there is a difference. He is a 3PL owner and does, third-party logistics for people. But he wrote an article. He owns Marketplace Prep. For those of you who may not, I'm sure a lot of you know him. He speaks quite often speaks every year at Amazon United and gets that show up and running with Scott Needham. and I don't know why, but of course I've blanked on his actual name. But you can Google Marketplace Prep and find him pretty easily. But he wrote an article this week, I believe, or released this article this week, all about
McConnell?
Amazon placement fees. Yes, James McConnell. Thank you.
Yeah.
All about Amazon placement fees and how it's kind of hurting profits, and for some, it's even made inventory management a bit tougher. So the one thing that a lot of people don't know is the Amazon placement fees is actually something that's been around for years. Matter of fact, there was a time when Amazon sellers clamored to pay inventory placement fees. And, because the program was actually, well, not all of it. There were two tiers to inventory placement fees. There was standard inventory placement, which would typically get you like one or two locations, sometimes three. And then there was a next level of inventory placement, which you could only get into by requesting and then waiting, sort of like hazmat. So you open up a case, say, hey, I'd really like to get into, this higher tier of inventory placement. And the sellers who had it, when they no longer accepted other sellers into the program, were always jealous of the ones who did have it. Well, now it's really kind of been forced on us for the most part. There are ways around it. We're going to talk about that. So it's no longer a convenience option. It's now kind of a take it or leave it option. So what changed? What made this come about? Well, Amazon's inventory distribution model got a major overhaul. You've heard Chris and I talk a ton about the flywheel distribution model that Amazon put into place. We've talked about the flywheel over and over again. And then, of course, because Amazon knows what Amazon sellers do, we take advantage of loopholes in the system every time we can. Amazon made extensive updates to their API back in December. It was supposed to be before December, but they ended up pushing it back a little bit. And this made it even harder for sellers to optimize their shipments and get around the ways that Amazon wants your inventory to go in. And of course, even today, even in March, there are still conversations from sellers that I witness and that I take part in, where sellers are scrambling to figure out how to avoid these fees while trying to keep their products moving as efficiently as possible. So let's dive a little bit into what Amazon placement fees are.
Yeah, it's funny. When the mastermind was running, we had a couple older sellers, bigger sellers, and they had the old school placement. And you're absolutely right. I was so jealous of the ability that they had to just fill up a box to 45 pounds, move it aside, grab a new box, and just boom, 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 boom. It sounded so much easier than the process I was going through. So, but all right. So we're going to talk about, let's explain Amazon placement fees at a little more depth. At its core, placement fees are, quote, a convenience tax, essentially. If you want to send all your inventory in a single shipment and let Amazon distribute it for you, you got to pay up. Amazon says they love efficiency. We certainly know that. But if you're not doing the work up front to optimize your shipments, you're going to get hit with these fees on the back end. And paying the fees doesn't always get your products into fulfillment centers any faster. In fact, it can actually slow things down, which is a little counterintuitive. So let's look at the logistics system as far as third-party sellers submitting inventory into Amazon. You've got what's known as national cross docks. This is where your inventory goes first if you pay placement fees. But your product is not immediately available for sale. It still has to be transferred to regional cross docks from there. And then from the regional cross docks is when it goes to the fulfillment centers. So there's a few steps in that process. Regional cross docks, if you skip the placement fees and use Amazon's optimized splits, your inventory will go straight to the regional distribution hubs, meaning it can become Prime eligible faster and start selling sooner. So that's that mechanism of being available early, or essentially in transit.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So let's talk a little bit about the 5-box rule. Okay. There's this idea that if you pack and ship at least 5 identical cartons or boxes per SKU, or you need to pack 5 identical boxes with, all identical number of items in those boxes, you can avoid placement fees. Amazon's official policy actually states to qualify for Amazon optimized inbound with no placement fees, shipments must include at least 5 identical cartons or pallets per item with the same quantity per carton. Now, I know that most of the people who come here are going to be they're going to be retail arbitrage, they're going to be online arbitrage. And so a lot of people worry, well, can I even take advantage of this if I want to? Yes, you can. You just need to be able to order in quantities of 5. So that could be you order 5 all the time, you order 10, 15, 20, et cetera, and so on. You're no longer are the days where you want to order 18 units. And I bring up 18 units because that used to be a kind of a sweet spot where it seemed that if you bought 18 units, they would all go to the same place rather than being spread out across Amazon's fulfillment centers. It was one of those loopholes that we had to kind of get around having split shipments. Okay. So this all sounds pretty easy, but this rule applies to pre-pack shipments. This is really what most arbitrage sellers are going to do anyway. And this is where sellers provide exact case pack details before shipping to Amazon. But Amazon also offers a post pack option, all right, which is where things get a little bit interesting or more difficult. So in pre pack, you tell Amazon how many units per carton or per case before shipping. You can meet that 5 box rule perfectly, or the 5 pallet rule, or whatever it is. Great. All right. Lots of arbitrage sellers can't seem to do that. And if you get it wrong, well, you're going to play placement. You're going to pay placement fees. With post pack, you just tell Amazon how many total units you're shipping. All right. No need for perfect case packing in post pack situations. Amazon decides where things go and often waives these placement fees automatically. But right now, this is only available for LTL or less than truckload and FTL or full truckload. You're not able to do this for small parcel. Now, does it eventually come down to SPD shipments? I have no idea. If I could tell you that, I'd be rich. Now the question is what are the best ways to be able to beat back some of these placement fees?
Right now, bear with me. This is all relayed from James McConnell's article, right? So I'm speaking from experience here, but I'll share what the strategies were. If you want to avoid placement fees, which can be upwards of hundreds or even thousands of dollars, here's what you need to do. You need to use Amazon's post-pack workflow. That's for LTL and FTL shipments. As Chris said, LTL is less than truckload. FTL is, I'm pretty sure the F stands for F and truckload, full F and truckload, right? That'll guarantee that you avoid the placement fees. That's not feasible for all of us, of course. You can also split off low quantity SKUs. If you have fewer than 5 units of a SKU, put it in its own shipment so it doesn't drag the entire batch into placement fee territory. Another option would be to ship 5+ pallets or boxes at a time whenever that's possible. Because once you hit the threshold, Amazon's optimized splits are almost always cheaper than paying the placement fees. And then also, you never want to mix split types. Okay. And this is specifically like thinking hazmat, oversized, and apparel, right? Those follow different fulfillment rules. So don't mix them up into the same batch or you're going to trigger those fees.
I think the things that are maybe most important for Amazon or like for arbitrage sellers. Yeah. James writes this from a place of dealing with people who are sending in not 50,000 units a year, but 50,000 units a month and 50,000 units a week. he's got some fairly big clients. So we got to break this down for the arbitrage sellers a little bit. But that never mixing split types, I think, is incredibly important. Hazmat shipments should be their own shipments. If you're going to do oversized, send them in their own shipments. Apparel, should be its own, and then everything else can kind of be its own. And then the whole, well, if I got 6 units of something, then you need to pull 1 unit out, and that needs to be its own shipment as well. Okay. All right, so let's talk a little bit about some of the other hidden costs of placement fees, because placement fees are not necessarily just about the money. All right. Oftentimes, you might see some extra time for fulfillment center transfers. Okay. This could be, it could be a week, it could be 3 weeks. You have no way to know. So if you pay placement fees, you're sending inventory to one of those national cross dock hubs that Chris mentioned before, which very likely could mean that it's going to be some longer delays before those items actually become prime eligible. Now, when it comes to arbitrage, my very last shipment that we shipped from home that I really paid attention to, rather than being shipped from the prep center, which I tend to pay less attention to, that's probably a problem I should fix, is it didn't take nearly that long. It was faster for most of the items. There are still some items that are getting checked in right now, and it has been about 2 weeks. But then I've got a friend who ships in an order of magnitude more than I do, and his last shipment was split to 72 different fulfillment centers, which that's going to take time and very likely going to end up in it's going to end up in more lost inventory, most likely, because it's going to more places. But some of the other things to think about, especially if you're a larger seller, is stockouts and low inventory fees. If you're sending all of your inventory to one fulfillment center and that warehouse is backed up, well, guess what? Your product is not going to get checked in. Heaven forbid it all goes to IND4, that place that just seems to be a black hole for inventory, and it all just gets lost. In the meantime, Amazon could charge you low inventory fees for those products that aren't available for prime shipping. Probably not a huge deal for most arbitrage sellers unless you're really at scale. But this could be a little bit more of something to think about for those who are moving some serious weight. Reimbursement issues. If Amazon mismeasures your product and overcharges you on placement fees, you could have some trouble getting that money back and things. And as of right now, I don't know. I don't think most reimbursement tools even cover placement fees at the moment. I was trying to do some research on whether that was actually the case or not. So if somebody can, let me know in the comments if I'm wrong. All right. So, Chris, my question to you is, if placement fees are causing like stock delays and things like that, is it actually smarter for us to try to do Amazon optimized shipment splits, even if the shipping costs seem higher? Or have you found yet that using inventory placement is more economical, even if you've got to wait an extra couple of days for your inventory to get checked in?
Well, it's not. It's more economical in the fact that I can simply adjust my sourcing and kind of deal with it while we kind of see how, or if there is a settling in period or adjustment period that Amazon's going to make after this, or an ongoing changes, once this policy is in place. So yeah, at some point in time, if these placement fees just, if I'm losing, stuff that I replenish fairly often, because now I'm just having to add too much in additional cost, ancillary fees and whatnot after I've sourced it, then yeah, I'll look into it. But I think at this point in time, I kind of just add a little bit of a bigger number to when I source.
Hmm.
It's a very unscientific way to do it, but as far as like speed and efficiency of the sourcing sessions, that's the quickest way to do it. So I'm kind of just taking it on the backside, just whatever it may be. Because I honestly, my main prep center, the one that does all the bulk of my products, I don't have the option to kind of get creative and split off 5 of each and then create a second shipment and
Hmm.
whatnot. At least at the moment, that may be something that as we get used to the process, they may introduce that. Are you aware of any prep centers that will actually accommodate the new policy?
Only one that I'm aware of.
Okay. Um, yeah. So, I mean, obviously, it would make sense to put the extra effort and time. Um, but I guess yeah, you kind of have to. I guess you have to calculate your own break even point. How much longer is it going to take you, to do this, and if it's even available. I mean, mostly for like personal shipments, coming out of my house. Um, yeah, I don't know. I'm kind of just taking it right now, which is certainly not the cheapest way to go.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think for arbitrage sales, I actually kind of like it. There's a little bit less to do. It's a little bit easier just to be able to, hammer through shipments. And I mean, on my last shipment, the per unit total cost really wasn't too bad. It was 45 cents a unit. I need to go in and look at some other shipments and see what, some more but that was all single unit, no multi packs. So it was all, and it was East Coast. So I need to go in and take a look and see what it is from the prep center. But for me, at 45 cents a unit for inbound shipping and inventory placement fees, I was pretty happy with it.
Hmm.
Yeah, I'd be happy with not paying them at all, but that's not an option. So, uh,
Do you recall what the old the premium placement? Do you remember what those charges were? What the old school sellers were paying?
30 cents is what sticks out in my mind. 30 cents a unit on top of inbound placement fees. Um,
Okay.
or sorry, on top of inbound shipping fees.
Right.
Um,
Right.
so
All right.
I did
So
it. I did it for Q4. It was amazing.
yeah. Yeah, like I told you in the mastermind, those guys, I mean, they could just churn through. The one guy he was close to 1 million a year. Um, he was shipping every day. And
Hmm.
I know my process. I mean, I was a newer seller at the time when the mastermind was running. So, I wasn't quite as efficient as I could have been, just simply being a novice. But the thought of shipping every single day, that sounded terrible until he explained it. And he's like, well, I mean, you're only buying, essentially, they're only buying one size box,
Yeah.
and it's, and I had all sorts of different size boxes. I was saving everything from OA that was coming into the house, and I was, it was some sort of weird ghetto Tetris that I used to play to try to, not resize if I didn't have to, and I'd like pile everything up in the one box that Amazon told me, and I try to like measure and see what maybe the the interior dimensions would be, and then go out in the garage and try to find the associated box. And so, I mean, from my perspective at that time, boy, it was quite a luxury to think of a process where you just buy, same size U-Haul box and just toss everything in until you hit 45 pounds and just move right to the next one.
Hmm.
So, I think, the one thing for sure, even if you're not ready to tackle anything, too complex to save the money, is make sure you take a look at your settings. Um, because I know in Seller Central, I had defaulted to Amazon optimized. And then I read something in there that said if it doesn't qualify for Amazon optimized, it automatically kicks you into uh, whatever they call it. So and I wasn't sure, and I'm not sure that we should trust Amazon to kick us into the appropriate region, meaning
Right.
east, west, central. So you may want to go into your settings and uncheck Amazon Optimized if you're not ready to dial it in quite yet, and make sure you at least have the region that's closest, or test it out. See what based on where your prep center is. Test out the different regions and see if there's some sort of cost difference. So you can kind of quick way to maybe save at least a little bit of money potentially.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And Patricia, we're talking about inventory placement fees, trying to do a little bit of a deep dive, help everybody understand those better. Now, before we move on to the next topic, Samir, I see you've got a question for Chris Rasick. Pop it in the chat. We will get to it, I promise. We don't skip anybody's questions. And if anybody else has a question you want us to get to, let us know. Pop it in the chat. We will get to those questions here after the next segment. And this deep dive was really courtesy of a blog post from James McConnell of Marketplace Prep. If you want to read what he wrote about it, go over to his blog at marketplaceprep.com. Check it out, and leave him a comment on there. It is a well-reasoned article. He does not write very many articles, but when he does, they're typically very well thought out and based on a fair amount of testing. That's just the way his beautiful mind works. So, hey, Luke, what's going on, sir? All right. Let's, for the past couple of weeks now, we have talked about razors and business laws and things like that, which, to be quite frank, has given me the, we'll call it an excuse to go down these rabbit holes into something that I'm already interested in, but now I've got to do it for work. Is what I can tell everybody when I'm reading about it. So this week we're going to talk about Maslow's hammer, and this is one of my favorite names of a business theory. There's another one I think called Newton's flaming laser. There are some really good named ones out there. But we're going to talk about Maslow's hammer and whether or not you might be stuck using the wrong tools or resources, things like that. So this is a bit of a psychological bias more than it is a razor or a law. And honestly, it could be harming your business quite a bit. And you may not even realize that you're trapped in it. So as Abraham Maslow put it, which he also came up with the hierarchy of needs, if you aren't familiar with the name. But if the only tool you have is a hammer, it is tempting to treat everything as if it were a nail. So that's where that cliche comes from. All right. It's this classic one size fits all mistake. And for Amazon sellers, it kind of shows up in everything from sourcing methods to pricing strategies to product selection, category choice. In short, if you're only using one particular strategy or only selling in one particular category, or maybe you're making the biggest mistake and only selling one particular brand, you could be missing out on some big opportunities and even setting yourself up for massive failure.
Yeah, exactly. Like Amazon is dynamic, right? It changes. The one thing we can be sure of is that something's going to change sooner rather than later, right? Whether that be seller fees going up, buy box gets suppressed, new restrictions pop up overnight, right? Didn't we hear, was there rumblings of another Nike pop-up restriction?
Yep.
Right? Suppliers have a change of heart on selling unlimited quantities, whatnot. There's a massive list, and each one of us here probably has their own massive list of unexpected changes that we have to deal with. If you're only using the same tactics that worked last year or that have worked X number of years that you've been doing this, you're setting yourself up for a tough ride. You always need to be learning, right? That is at the heart of why I take every OA challenge over again. I've taken at least 11 of them to some degree, because there's something that I'll forget, or that I know that there are grooves that I'm getting stuck in as far as sourcing or process or whatever my process is. And to take that course again refreshes, it'll remind me of something that I liked, but I never actually took to or whatever. And it shines the light a little brighter, and you can kind of refine some processes, and sometimes you need to, right? I mean, how many times some of these changes, how many times have we talked about needing to kind of double down on your sourcing skills, because there is now inventory placement fees to deal with. The number that we have to add on to the buy cost has climbed higher, so like I mentioned, the first place I went in my head was, well, I need to source higher profit stuff. And if you're in a groove, if you're in a rut, essentially, of only sourcing certain things or, certain numbers or whatnot, you may need to refresh and advance your skills to bring in those higher profit items to source.
Mm-hmm. I need to always be learning because I think that I've got a fairly smooth brain, and I need to do everything I can to keep it not smooth. Uh, Now let's talk about a couple of these traps. All right, trap number one: relying on just one sourcing method. So we tried to tailor this specifically for Amazon sellers, and relying on one sourcing method for me is kind of a big one. A lot of sellers will stick to one way of finding products. They become a one trick pony. And maybe that is only reverse sourcing. And that's where a lot of people start off with, which is fine. It's a great way to source. Or maybe they're only scanning the clearance racks at Walmart and then they're wondering why everything they find is dropping in price. Maybe they only rely on tactical arbitrage by itself. This is a little top of mind recently because I've been trying to break down some myths for my small group about how to properly use tactical arbitrage. Um, and the problem here is if you're only using one sourcing method, you could be missing out on entire categories of profitable products. Or at the very least, you're missing out on whatever the blind spots are of the particular sourcing method that you're into. Okay. Uh, and honestly, some of the best sellers that we've interviewed, okay, and I'm taking Chris and I out of the equation. Just imagine we're bottom quartile of Amazon sellers. We've had top 5% Amazon sellers come on the show that we've been able to interview. And the ones that are absolutely crushing it are doing a mix of retail arbitrage. They're throwing in some online arbitrage. They're throwing in wholesale sourcing. They either have private label products or are thinking about doing private label products. Like they're just taking whatever opportunity is available to them, and they're even flipping Amazon to Amazon products when they can. As a matter of fact, there's one seller we had on. He's does huge numbers of Amazon to Amazon flips. Now, they may not practice all of these at the same time, but we do often find that a lot of these sellers who have scaled up might put two or three of these into place at the same time.
Exactly. If you're limiting yourself to only the clearance aisle or you're only running Target scans and TA or whatever it may be, you're competing with thousands of other sellers. How many times have you heard us talk about building moats? There's no moat on target.com, right? The moment you start using multiple strategies at the same time, you're going to open up new revenue streams that other sellers aren't touching. Chris had to remind me last week, and I'm drawing a blank again, so he'll have to remind me again. But when we're talking about tactical arbitrage, a massive amount of scans are all concentrated on the most popular / most obvious stores. So there's so much profit in the middle tier, in those lesser known websites, which is what I like about reverse sourcing. But you still see the point, of just kind of putting the blinders on and just doing what works. The problem is once something changes and you need to go for a different tool in the tool belt, you're not going to have the reps or the ability to do so.
Exactly. Uh, one other mistake I see is sellers get comfortable with just one particular category. They maybe only sell toys, or maybe they only stick with grocery or apparel. Some maybe they won't touch electronics because they seem complicated, or they think they've got to put serial number is recorded in their store name to be able to get into that category. Uh, and the worst thing is some sellers get so married to one particular brand that they can see their entire business shut down with a single email, or they may not be able to make that plum card payment because of not having any more inventory, or having to call it all back. And the smartest sellers I know, they spread their risk across multiple categories. They spread their risk across multiple brands. Matter of fact, when I was talking to Eli Glukowski about this just recently, he said, worst case scenario, he's like, you've got to be absolutely crushing it with a particular brand, but he would never be comfortable having more than 10% of his inventory in one particular brand. And there'd have to be a serious reason for that. Like it was, you've only got 20 products over at Amazon. And so, two of them are from the same brand. Maybe toys crush it in Q4, but you might want to add electronics and home goods for the rest of the year. And maybe if apparel's got high returns, but you can offset some of that with some grocery items that people technically aren't supposed to be able to return, that's how they diversify. And so let's talk a little bit about trap number 3, which is a rigid ROI strategy.
Yeah, this one is absolutely brutal. You know what? If you're a kid or you're just learning to bowl, those little guards on the gutters are helpful, right? You can kind of get you get the process down, little muscle memory. You can try it out, watch the ball hit some pins. You get acclimated to the game itself because you're just learning. Eventually, you got to take the gutter guards off, right? Setting strict ROI guidelines. It's helpful for beginners, but it's not something that you should hang on to past, once you graduate into intermediate, and once your experience grows. If you're only looking for 30% ROI or a minimum of $5 profit, you're limiting yourself, and you're kind of you're putting a governor on the sales that you can actually accomplish, and you're kind of limiting, you're dampening your own potential of your own store, basically. The truth of the matter is some products make up for lower ROI with higher velocity. Money loves speed. We talk about it all the time, right? So, but what the speed factor is it's a compounding factor, right? If you just blindly follow a set pricing rule instead of adapting to each situation, you're flat out, you're leaving money on the table, right? So, I just sourced. I found something. It sells for $9.99. And small and light is long gone. However, there's a pricing break. It's well below $5 profit, but the velocity is great. And it's a small item. It's easy to prep, easy to pack, and I can get a whole bunch of them. And the great thing about it is, if I'm only buying it for a few dollars, you can go a little deeper, right? We don't advise it as a strategy overall, but if you're used to averaging about 10 units per ASIN, as you're buying it, you find something for $4 or something that makes a couple bucks. 20 units doesn't hurt under worst case scenario. So
absolutely, yeah, it is a great way to test going deeper, finding those products that sell for cheaper. So, the question at the end of the day is, how do you escape this trap of Maslow's hammer and start thinking more like a real entrepreneur instead of just following those old habits all the time? Well, first, you've got to test new sourcing methods. And if you've never tried online arbitrage, give it a shot. Take one day a week and spend a couple hours on it. If you only do retail arbitrage, turn one of the products that you pick up off the shelf around, find out who the distributor is on the back of it, and give them a call. Call the 800 number and see what it takes to get an account with them. That is, I'll tell you what, for retail arbitrage, I actually think retail arbitrage sellers have a couple of advantages. Number one, oftentimes you're going to find products that may not be available everywhere, or at least the discount that you can get is not available everywhere, giving you a bit of a moat. But on top of that, your hurdle to finding distributors is so low. And the reason I say that is, we source, I don't know, 150, 250 different brands every, month or 2 months. And we never get to see those products. So I never have the opportunity of flipping the item around and seeing, oh, this is distributed by X, and here's their phone number, and here's their address, because it all goes to a prep center. But with retail arbitrage, you can literally take a picture of every single product, see who it's distributed by, and then say, okay, on Thursdays or Fridays, I'm going to pull those out and I'm going to call every single one of them. Anyway, expand the product categories that you're sourcing in. Maybe you've never sold electronics or home goods. Start with something small and learn the category. Be flexible with your pricing. This is another thing that I think a lot of people get stuck on. Do not use emotion, and realize that you are not married to your product. You date products, you don't marry them. Okay. If you need to lower the price to sell something, that doesn't make you a price tanker. Okay. You cannot allow the hatred for price tanking to keep you from lowering your price when the market calls for it. All right. Matter of fact, I just sourced something last night where I will intentionally lower the price. It's something that a lot of other people will probably look over and pass over because the price is higher than what the market will bear. And when it gets into stock, I will intentionally lower the price to increase the velocity of the product based on previous demand. That does not make me a price tanker. That makes me someone who knows what the market will bear based on evidence, based on history, and me wanting to be able to move my inventory rather than have it rack up storage fees and things like that. So I'm making a good business decision. Now, whoever is currently on that listing at the higher price, they may not think the same way, but they're wrong. Okay. Make sure that you're staying educated. I'm not saying, just come listen to us on Sundays and Wednesdays, although it's probably not a bad place to hang out. But go and find some smart sellers across social media. There are people like Steve French and Kim and Perry Coughlin and Saul and Arbitrage Ops and Jeff Storch. I mean, there are hundreds of millions of dollars worth of sales underneath just those names that I have shared. And you can learn from them for free and interact with them for free. The sellers who stay the most informed tend to outlast and outperform the ones who get stuck in their old ways. And then the other thing is, every business, even though we know, yes, this is kind of the playbook, this is what works all the time, it's fun to experiment. Try something every now and again just to see what happens. Even if it means you lose 50 or $100, that's okay. Like, that is, it's an R&D cost. Take it off on your taxes and see if just maybe one of those small bets works out. Chris, any other Maslow's hammers that you frequently see in the space?
Yeah, thinking that seasonality, that everything completely stops once the holiday associated with the season has passed.
Yep.
Classic example, we've been preaching this for years, is selling candy canes in February. People get stuck on these bright line distinctions of when you can and can't sell certain seasonal items. Sure, velocity will slow, right? So will the seller count. If you wait out that period of time where everybody gets emotional and they get a little anxious and they start tanking the price because they need to sell out because they still have 10 units of, Fruit Loop flavored candy canes and it's January 3rd, if you wait that out, you can sell it for a nice profit later on in January, if not even February,
Mhm.
and there's
I'll
multiple
give you
scenarios like that.
I'll give you a perfect example of that. Um, Last time we sold a Christmas ornament, okay, was yesterday. That was the last time that a Christmas ornament sold. Yes, it is.
Yeah.
It was March 15th yesterday, and we sold a Christmas ornament profitably.
Yep.
So people buy things at times that you would never think they would.
Yeah, exactly. And the nice thing about that is depending on when you source that ornament, I went through and like there are a couple Hallmark shops. They're kind of like independent, so there's not one main Hallmark.com that I know of. But they've slashed prices. You can get these ornaments, your buy cost, you can get low single digits as far as buy cost goes. So I love stuff like that. And that scenario that you talked about before, where you're going to come in with a lower price, I love that. I mean, that's one of the scenarios that gets me really excited. Another advantage of having a database and keeping good records of everything that you come across is those scenarios where when you catch it and the seller count has dropped, the reverse pinch, the when it opens up, when the price is climbing and the seller count's dropping as everybody's clear their stock out, you'll see somebody, if something's selling for $30, and like 90, 180 day average buy box is around 30, and then everyone's cleared out and you're down to just one or two sellers, and for whatever reason they've jacked it up to $55, and velocity is basically slammed on the brakes because nobody's going to buy it at 55. It's really, really slow. You can source it, and if you come in at say like $39.99, and you get buy box support behind that, it's going to reignite velocity, and you're going to have first mover advantage when the velocity picks back up, and that can be a very
Mhm.
profitable situation. I love that.
Yeah, every single time. Yeah, I was sorry. I just pulled up some ornaments, and you're absolutely right. You're looking at $3 and some change to be able to source some of them now. Not saying
Yeah.
any of those or even all of them are going to move, but there's obviously some profits available out there, and some that will even sell now because we've got to remember Christmas ornaments are not things that just go on Christmas trees. You see plenty of Christmas ornaments in uh, hanging from people's rear view mirrors.
Hmm.
Might be a
Hmm.
might be a pet peeve of mine, but it's all right. That people can do what they want.
You're
Uh,
more of a fuzzy dice guy.
I am got to be fuzzy dice or what. Sometimes you see a pair of handcuffs hanging in a mirror.
Right.
Those are where it should be. All right. So we've got all that underway. I appreciate you guys listening to us. Yeah, this honestly, this is kind of a self-serving thing every Sunday because yes, we get to talk a little bit of news like we did with the inventory placement fees, but then we get to teach something that we just learned and really just kind of solidifies the knowledge for us. At least that's the way that I look at it. So um, let's answer some questions. All right. Let's see here. Karen, I feel like I missed something. I saw that Wackhole and Bali will be gated soon. When did I miss this? So, Karen, I don't know if you're a reader of my weekly newsletter, but if you are, you may have seen Wackhole and Bali mentioned in my piece about Adidas gating. It is not that Wackhole and Bali are going to be gated. It is that they have already gone down the path that Adidas seems to be going down now, where they limit the sellers who can sell their current and in stock inventory. and sellers can only sell the things that are maybe no longer manufactured or offered by the brand themselves.
Which, what a massive overreaction the Adidas news turned out to be.
Yeah. I just think we're seeing this in so many places right now. It's kind of insane. We're seeing this in the stock market. We're having a bit of a downturn. If anybody pays attention to the crypto space, it's not mooning like everyone thought it would be under this new administration, and even with a strategic reserve and all of that stuff. And we see it with Amazon. It seems like nobody wants to zoom out, because if they zoom out, things are still pretty daggone good. But no, let's zoom in where all the red is only. That's the only thing we want to look at, is where's the bleeding.
Arbitrage is dead.
Right. Joe Lupoli, hopefully that's right. My son wants to open a seller account. The problem is he has the same name as me. I've been selling for 2 years. Would that be a problem? There's got to be another Christopher Grant that's selling on Amazon. It's not a big deal. Now, do they live at home with you? Are you guys living in the same place? That is going to be the thing that is more important to make sure Amazon knows or understands. And you don't want them thinking that, oh, you've got 2 different accounts at the same place. So personally, what I would probably do is, one, I would open a case and say, hey, my son wants to open up his own Amazon seller account. Give them the details, all of that stuff. Do you have to do that? No. But this gives you a trail. This gives you a paper trail that, hey, you've let Amazon know. And then to be more on the safe side, I would make sure that your son has his own LLC. Make sure that he's got maybe he goes and gets a UPS box or one of those digital business addresses or whatever they're called. Get one of those. Make sure he's got his own business bank account. Make sure he's all set up to be legitimate. You could even get him his own internet. Like it's not necessarily cost prohibitive to have more than one internet service provider in your home. And then make sure that you guys are not sharing computers. And then you've got a bit of a firewall there. Not a lot, but a little bit. Okay. And maybe don't sell the same products. Like don't source together and be like, hey, we're both going to sell, this toy, and we're going to sell this, make sure you guys are selling different stuff, and you will probably be just fine with that. Hey, Luke, what's going on, man? Good to see you in here. FOAB, is there any correlation between the placement fees and how Amazon fulfills FBA orders? About 80% of my orders have been expedited lately. Could be the items I'm sourcing or some other reason. I don't see there being a correlation between the two. I think this might just be something anecdotal where it just happens that this is the case. And expedited for Prime members just means they're getting it within 2 days. So it's like all Prime orders should be expedited, or at least most of them should be. So I don't think that placement fees have anything to do with how Amazon fulfills the orders, because Amazon charges you those placement fees before your items sell, which means how would they know how they're going to sell?
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, sorry. So Samir's asking for a collab. No, unfortunately, no. We're not going to be able to do that. Oh, interesting. Instagram popped back in a 1 hour time limit on lives. All right. Hey, Joe, what's going on? Hannah after getting reactivated for a multiple seller account section 3, I've not been able to get any auto ungates yet. Any tips, please? Chances are you're just going to have to sell through some things. Plus, I think Amazon's getting a little tougher on auto ungating and things like that. So yeah, I can't say for sure whether you've been, like shadow banned on the back end from auto ungating. Maybe you just haven't looked through enough products. But I would just sell what you can, and then keep trying, and you'll probably get some to open up eventually. Unfortunately, that's all we can do with auto ungating.
Now you had mentioned that you changed your corporate structure on your Amazon store, and it actually kind of reverted you back to beginner seller access to selling
Felt
stuff.
that way. Yep.
Did you have to go through like I know it's kind of hearsay on whatever the beginner level is when you get out of the sandbox, but was it about the same amount of units or sales, or did they release you sooner, would you say?
No, I think it was about the same. I think once you hit that, 20,000, maybe 25,000 in cumulative sales, I don't know if there's like a unit number, but I think it feels like 20 to 25,000 that the gates sort of open up
Okay.
a little bit.
Now there does seem to be a bit of a back end reorganization, like you alluded to, because I am seeing far more brands with the dollar sign in front of it. If I am, if I do happen to be restricted on an item that I'm taking a look at, there seem to be more of them, or it's happening more often, which could be coincidence. I'm not saying there's anything concrete here, but it sure seems that way. So I think there may be, and it would kind of fit with some of the trends that we're seeing as far as how Amazon handles brands and this wide ranging fight against counterfeits that they're the war that they're waging on those. So that may have something to do with it too. Just
let's play that out a little bit. Okay. We had the great waves of section 3, which were, and everyone was like, oh, this is another overreaction. Here's Amazon kicking arbitrage sellers out of the space. No, here's Amazon trying to make sure that everyone is selling legit products. Was it a kind way to do it? No, it wasn't. Unfortunately, Amazon does not have safe spaces for Amazon sellers. And so they were using Maslow's hammer to try to fix a problem that they obviously have. But now that we're sort of past that, do seeing more dollar signs on brands make sense? Yes. Let me explain my reasoning if we're thinking about things from Amazon's perspective a little bit. Number one, maybe 95% or more of Amazon sellers came through with legitimate invoices, legitimate sources, and things were good. And so you've just got maybe 5% of the sellers who were selling, products that were illegitimate, or they could not prove provenance of those items. Well, let's just say that out of those 5% of sellers, could that 5% of sellers have some similarities in the brands that they're selling, in the types of products that they're selling? I'm betting they probably could, because a lot of times when widespread fraud occurs, it does often seem to come from it can either come from a certain country. We've known in the past that China has done this. We've known that sellers from Turkey have done this. Do sellers in America do it too? Yes, absolutely. I'm not going to say that we don't. But if that's the case, and they're seeing, oh, well, there's a ton of Nike that's being counterfeited, there's a ton of Polo, and so on and so forth, would it not then make sense to once you see that data, say, all right, now we've gone through these section 3s, well, you know what, we're also going to go in and regate some of these higher value brands, and We're going to make those brands harder to get ungated in to try to keep those counterfeit sellers out. Because why would they go and buy legitimate products to then sell illegitimate product? Like if you got to send in an invoice for 300, is that bar too high for someone who wants to come in and sell counterfeit products to jump over? Crypto Butthead. If a customer posts seller feedback that I sold them fake shoes that I proved as authentic to Amazon, is there a way to remove it if the tool or reopening the feedback removal case doesn't work? Yeah, open up a regular case with Amazon. This might be one of those cases where you have to get on the phone with Amazon and like go up the chain. But you're gonna need to prove everything. So here's the thing. And this is something that we talk about over and over again. You've got to figure that you're dealing with the least intelligent employee on their worst day, and then make it extremely clear. So if you open a case and you're like, hey, this feedback, I proved to Amazon this was legitimate. Well, you then have to expect them to go in, look at the feedback, match it up to the order, and match up that order to the complaint, and then go and see that you beat the complaint. I wouldn't want to do that when I've got 9.5 minutes to get through a ticket, and so I'm going to need to see a nice easy chain proving everything to me. Hey, look, here's the feedback I got. You can see that this feedback was for this order. You can see that this order was returned saying that it was inauthentic. You can see that then a complaint was opened and I beat that complaint, and here's all the evidence. But I've still got this negative feedback. Can I get this negative feedback removed? And then show them the terms of service that would make it so that they could get that removed for you. Do that, and then when they say no, or if they say no, now you've got something. Hey, you know what? Can I talk to your supervisor? Can I go up the chain until you get that removed? On the other side of that coin is it probably doesn't matter too much. As long as you don't have like a 50% seller feedback or something, it probably doesn't matter if you don't want to go through all that work. Luke, I tested Hallmark ornaments this last Q4, ended up liquidating most of them because they didn't go out of stock like they did the last couple of years. Yeah, I did see that a little bit as well. And actually, I don't think we sent in any Christmas ornaments until after the holidays.
Yeah, I actually prefer Christmas ornaments in the new year.
Absolutely. Peyton, favorite tools to assist with manual sourcing? Good question. Number one, Keepa. Number one tool to assist you with manual sourcing. Number two, RevSeller. RevSeller, $8 a month or $97 for the entire year. You get a mobile app, you get an online app. It has a lot of tricks in it that are just really, really good for Amazon sellers. You can do manual sourcing with it. Highlight the title, pull up all the items on Amazon. Matter of fact, when I sourced for I think 2 hours last night, that's all I did. That's all I used was RevSeller's copy and search Amazon.
Yep, little right click and that sidebar opens up. I mean, you can cruise through entire sites so fast. It's great. And if you're a Seller Amp user, there's something similar from what I remember too.
Yep. I've made it so that in both RevSeller and Seller Amp, I can highlight the title of something. I can hit Command R, and then it will go in and it will search that for me. And then I made the same shortcut in Seller Amp, so I can highlight the title, hit Command S, and it does the same thing. If you want to source two-handed, Can you briefly explain flywheel distribution? Heard you say this a few times. Not sure I understand how it works. Well, essentially, flywheel is going to be like these main hubs are the center of the flywheel. And they're going to, and that's what we talked about a little earlier. You've got the national cross docks, you've got some regional cross docks. Figure that these two things, the national and regional cross docks, are kind of at the middle of a wheel. And then you've got spokes that go out to all the outer edges. And those are essentially, where Amazon is taking all the products to try to get them as close as possible to the customer. And that's where you've got fulfillment centers. Okay. So fulfillment centers are meant to hold inventory for a very short period of time and be as close to the customer as possible to reduce not only the speed at which Amazon gets the items to the customer, but also the cost of the last mile, which is the most expensive portion of logistics. It is that last mile delivery. So that's essentially their flywheel or spoken wheel model of distribution.
We were talking about when we were talking about inventory placement and skipping the outer cross docks and going straight to the regional cross docks. Is it logical to think, or maybe I'm just wondering whether, because considering the new reimbursement policy, would skipping the step and going straight to the regional cross dock, would that actually reduce the amount of lost inventory potentially? Is that a stretch to think that? Like just less handling overall?
Intellectually, it makes sense. Yes. But does it actually work that way, in practice? I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
I'd love
like
to.
the theory.
I'd love to, if there's a way to like A/B test that, and I mean, it'd have to be a pretty big scale. It'd basically be a seller would have to take their entire inventory and then have some inventory placement, some optimize and compare, lost inventory rates.
Mm-hmm. How do you actually get a manager with seller support? Anytime I've asked, they've refused to get me one. I just flash these baby blues around and people just, kind of do what I ask. No, in reality, I am trying not to sound not narcissistic, but braggy here. I really try when I'm on the phone with people to like really make them feel good. Just make them feel like they're the most important person that I'm having a conversation with, not just that day, but that week. And that tends to make conversations easier. Okay. And it's something I'm teaching my kids. Like, let's say we go get some coffee. Now, I don't drink coffee. I get my caffeine through other ways. We do it the old fashioned way. But I get my wife coffee, and I'm the guy. Sorry, guys. This is supposed to be a professional show. But anyway, I'm the guy.
We'll catch those jokes on the Wednesday show. That's Sunday. That's a Sunday joke.
Yeah, I'm the guy who's asking, hey, how's your day going? How are you doing? If they've got an interesting, I try to make sure that everyone feels, important, like they are the most important person in the world. And that tends to make things a little bit easier in today's day and age. And I hate to sound like like an old guy, but in today's day and age where a lot of communication is digital, I think we've lost that art. I don't want to say art of we've lost the art of conversation. We've lost the art of, persuasion a little bit, and we're just used to banging away on a keyboard and, per my last email. And when we use a little bit of honey rather than vinegar, it tends to be easier to get our way.
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny. Like I see one train of thought that kind of explains how much, just how ubiquitous selling skills actually are, whether we realized it or not. But like you're constantly selling far more than I think most people realize. And that train of thought exists in a period of time where our social skills are eroding because so much of our interactions are over the internet at the same time. So it's almost creating an opportunity to where if you can kind of hone your sales skills, and when I say that, don't think smarmy used car salesman, just simply persuasion is probably a better classification for it. It almost, there's a gap that's widening to where if you can kind of hone those skills, it could prove advantageous.
Yeah. And now here's the other thing. If you don't get what you want with one person, you can hang up and you can call back again. And sometimes, so there is, I know this CPA, and he spends a lot of time on the phone with the IRS. Oof. There is something that would make me drink. But he has said, he's like, if someone tells me something I don't like, I hang up and I call again. And, and I'm like, well, how many times? He's like, until I hear what I want. And that's kind of the mindset we need to have. Akbar, is retail arbitrage dead? No. Matter of fact, I think it's due for a renaissance, if anything. So I wrote something on Twitter earlier today in response to a comment on a friend of the show, Steve French's post. But someone was like, well, Steve, you've got a retail arbitrage lead list. What about this or what about that? And I just happened to comment just off the cuff. I was like, I said, I joined Steve's retail arbitrage lead list because we want to bring some retail arbitrage back into our business. And unfortunately, I don't have the time to go out and necessarily spend training someone like I would really like to. And so the thought process was, well, we'll use this lead list to train and a little bit less of our time. So kind of set some guardrails for them, let them go out, do some things, maybe make some mistakes, and then, we'll figure it out from there. And so since I joined his list, I went back and I went through a couple of the different suppliers that he uses on his lead list and went through maybe a month or a month and a half worth of leads. And I was expecting to see price erosion. And this is for lack of a better term, I was really surprised at how little price erosion there was. Now, my guess is because this could have been stuff that's not necessarily available at every single store that he sources around the country. Now, is that saying that I couldn't find it? No, it's saying I might only be able to get 30 or 40% of what's on his lead list, and that's okay because that will more than pay for it. But then what I know that a lot of other people won't think about is that even a retail arbitrage lead list offers rabbit trails. Okay. If there's a water bottle on the lead list and I go and I pick that up, well, why wouldn't I take the time to scan every other water bottle in that aisle? Or why wouldn't I just be like, okay, well, if someone's going to buy a water bottle, what might be the other thing that they buy with a water bottle? For example, if it were a Stanley, are they going to buy one of those, what are the like purse things that go on the outside of a Stanley? Well, if they've got those sitting right next to them, shouldn't I go ahead and scan all of those? Or maybe it introduces you to a new sale that's going on. Okay. Well, this item is shared on the lead list and it's good because of this particular sale at this particular retailer. Well, I need to say, okay, I'm going to go in and now I'm going to scan every single item that is on that sale at that retailer. And it makes for very easy rabbit trails as well.
Yeah, we both of us separately, kind of had the similar thought, or we arrived at the same place, even prior to interviewing Steve again. But we both had the opinion that retail arbitrage, people are kind of sleeping on it, but the opportunity, the potential for it, that hasn't lessened very much at all. So, we both kind of arrived at collectively the approach that adding retail arbitrage would be a huge positive to each of our stores. So, yeah, and another thing that you mentioned, and I'm thinking of Target as a source in particular during this example, because Kohl's for that matter too, like corporate Target, corporate Kohl's, they hate resellers, right?
Mm-hmm.
Individual store managers love resellers because we're gonna get their clearance out of their way. We're gonna free up shelf space. We're gonna get rid of old stock that they've been trying to move and they've been slashing prices. So there is also a pricing hierarchy too, right? Because if you go to Walmart.com, Target.com, they're gonna have company-wide markdowns, but it's if you've been in the clearance aisle, take Walmart for example. Remember the old 1 cent video games? That game's not 1 cent on Walmart.com, right? So that's the example of store-specific pricing that you can take advantage of only with retail arbitrage.
Mm-hmm.
Now I'm using the big stores, Walmart and Target, as the example, but that same logic will go down into those mid-tier stores as well. Think of the TJX companies. Think of Hobby Lobby. I was in Hobby Lobby the other day, and their clearance was much, much lower. I found something that I had looked at online, and it was actually clearance priced in store, much lower than what I saw online. So that's another distinct advantage that RA has.
Mm-hmm. And another advantage that RA has is go talk to people. I've heard stories of people that I know, like, oh, I got kicked out of a Target. I have never once been kicked out of a retail store for doing retail arbitrage. Not ever. Now, have I done retail arbitrage over the last 3 or 4 years? No. But did I used to do retail arbitrage for 12 and 16 hours a day at times and source with a trailer? Yes, absolutely. And not one time have I ever been kicked out. Now, I was also willing to have conversations with employees. I was willing to chat with managers and be proactive about it. One of my best scores ever was at a Meijer. Meijer, I don't know if they still do this because I haven't been to a Meijer in a long time, but they would have these 50% off clearance sale days. And I would always make sure to hit the 50% off clearance. And when I was in there, I would always ask for an extra discount. Hey man, I can buy a lot more than your regular customer. I know this stuff is already on clearance. It's also 50% off clearance. Can you guys move any more if I buy in large quantities? Yeah, actually we can. I think we can throw another 10% or another 15% off there. Makes the math a little bit harder. Fortunately, I don't have to do it in public, but makes your moats a heck of a lot bigger. So retail arbitrage is awesome in my opinion. Roslyn, if I submitted my invoice, pictures, drop of blood, etc., to get ungated in a particular brand to the point they said don't submit again, should I try to ask for a supervisor at this point? I would probably I'd probably give it some time. Let it cool down. Ask them to close the case. Give them a week, and then try to open the case again. I'm not sure that you're going to be able to get anybody on the phone for ungating purposes. And make sure that what you have is 100% what they're looking for. Not that I want you to go and buy units from another, supplier or anything like that. But sometimes that may be the case. And then also evaluate whether or not is it waited out 30 days at this point is what Andre says. I would go with what he says. Uh, you know, is it worth actually getting ungated for? Like, are you sure that it's going to be worth the work to get ungated in this particular brand? If so, then I'd want to keep at it. Now, look at this little shout out for OA Leads 24/7. If you're not familiar with that, that is Chris Rasick's lead list and occasional newsletter. You should head over to oalead247.com and sign up. But I do have a National Lampoon Christmas decoration. I'm selling one or two of a week since January. Unfortunately, down to my last one, which was a national or an OA Lead 24/7 lead.
Yeah, you gotta love that. That kind of just keeps everything flowing a little bit. Just those tiny little sales, just keeps the wheels greased.
Yeah. Joe, with another great example right here. Hit a store a week ago for supplies for the warehouse. Couldn't help myself. Started scanning. Then 10 minutes, found 20 units. Buy cost 50, selling for 142. That's beautiful. I missed at the beginning what you said about your prep center and saving on placement or shipping fees. Can you explain that again? What would be helpful? It's possible that if your prep center were to offer optimized shipping, not all prep centers will do it. Some of them you have to just go with what's easiest. But if they offer optimized shipping, you might be able to overcome some of those placement fees. All right. I don't see any other questions. Chris, anything else you wanted to get to today?
No, I think I'll save the axe I have to grind for next week. I think there's a razor that we can pull up next week, so I'll save that.
Beautiful. Well, as we close, have you happened to hear about what Sean Connery has said about underwear?
No, I have not.
They should be shilk, not shatten. All right, guys, that is the Sunday show. We'll be back this Wednesday at 5:30 p.m. to do this all over again, share a little bit of news with you guys. I hope you guys have a great rest of what's left of the work weekend, and we'll see you on Wednesday.